First, I'd like to thank Sam and Monique for allowing me to record this and present it over YouTube. So the community where I've been working in northern Siberia since 1994 is called Ustivam. Hunting and fishing and trapping is really important there, both for subsistence and for their esoteric knowledge. So Ustivam is about a 2-hour helicopter ride northeast of Dudinka, the regional capital, and a shot of Ustivam there at the bottom. Hunting skill varies a lot within the community, and things like what this individual is doing down here, cutting the spinal cord of a caribou that's been shot so that he can butcher it, is a fairly dangerous activity. So, like a lot of other hunting and gathering communities around the world, food sharing beyond the household is very widespread, and so in my study of food sharing, which I'm going to be presenting here, or summarizing, I documented a number of local reasons for sharing, which you might think about in terms of traditional ecological knowledge. Half the community are my kin, emphasizing a kinship aspect. Also, this one for ourselves is kinship relating to a larger household, extended household. Never return a bag empty. That's something that's more like attitudinal reciprocity. I give it if I have it. That's more of generosity. The law of the tundra is referenced a lot in the community, and I'm going to talk more about that later on. So I'll be discussing the distributions from 77 hunts that I observed and took records on in 2001 and 2003. This is what the network looks like. Originally looking mainly at trying to evaluate the kinship, reciprocity, tolerated scrounging, and costly signaling hypotheses. But in this presentation, I'd also like to pitch an idea that relates these mechanisms to the traditional knowledge about sharing in the community. So our dependent variable in matrix regressions is the frequency of inter-household food transfers. We've got 378 transfers amongst 204 inter-household relationships, 36 donor households, and 102 recipient households. And then this is analyzed in UCINet with an MRQAP procedure in a 177 by 177 matrix format. Independent variables include inter-household relatedness, and this is based on genealogies going back several generations. We've got embodied wealth that's based on hunter skill ratings done by 9 key informants in 2003 with all the hunters. And we've got some missing data here, and that results in a downward bias in this variable, but it still turns out to be significant. Material wealth based on a scale of 4 types of hunting equipment and occupation of hunting territories. And this is basically usufruct rights to particular territories. So we looked at skill and wealth differences, skill and wealth sums, sender effects, and receiver effects. The transpose of the food sharing matrix to represent the reciprocal transfers. The frequency of receiving gifts or favors in anticipation or exchange of bush food. So this was there were a series of questions on my survey that asked people distributing food about favors or other services that recipients had done for them or given to them prior to the transfer of the food. We also looked at average age differences of households, and then looked at the costs of the hunt, both in terms of duration and distance. And we looked at difference matrices, sum matrices, sender effects, and receiver effects. So the variables individually entered into MRQAP, most of them were not significant, but a few of the significant ones were kinship, reciprocal sharing, and the sum of dyadic household skill. Receiving gifts in exchange had a stronger coefficient than the sum of dyadic household skill, but was a not significant predictor of the food sharing. So we did evaluated a number of combinations here of these variables, and adding in some interaction effects, we improved the R square of the model, and the best one with the fewest number of independent variables is number 6 here. So number 6 includes kinship, which had a fairly strong coefficient, and significance was good. An interaction effect between kinship and reciprocity. So this, on top of kinship, we've got kinship and reciprocity interacting, and that was also significant, not quite as strongly. We've got reciprocity interacting with the sum of skill, and this is a pretty strong positive indicator, very significant. When we create this interaction term, the main term of skill sum drops out of significance. So interestingly, the variation that explains is included in reciprocity, and we'll talk about that in a second. So then the main term of reciprocal transfer is very significant, but the coefficient is negative, which means that we've got the reverse thing going on there. People give food to the extent that people do not reciprocate. And so we added in frequency of receiving gifts, and the coefficients don't change much. In particular, reciprocal transfer, I predicted that if frequency of receiving gifts was explaining a lot of the variation, that this is explaining that that this coefficient would go down. But in fact, this coefficient goes up, and these coefficients go down: the kinship and reciprocity, and the reciprocity and skill. So frequency of receiving gifts is probably part of reciprocal kin relationships or reciprocal risk buffering relationships, but not so much with these generosity transfers. So a summary of these empirical results: the frequency of transfers to households increases as relatedness increases, as predicted by kinship theory, inclusive fitness theory. An interaction between relatedness and reciprocity in addition to relatedness alone, such that as relatedness and reciprocity increase, so do food transfers. And this indicates some closely related households are sharing food reciprocally. An interaction between reciprocity and the sum of dyadic skill, so that as skill and reciprocity increase, so do food transfers. And this goes along with Hill and Kaplan's risk minimization reciprocity hypothesis. Food transfers increase in frequency as recipient households reciprocate less. And these seem to be unidirectional transfers from haves to have-not, and might be considered generous transfers. But that's a question that we wanted to investigate. So when we added in the reciprocal, the frequency of receiving goods and services, this didn't improve the model, and so we do believe that these are truly generous transfers. So the food sharing network here in Nusavam is a complex system, and I'm drawing on Matt Jackson's work on games on networks, and feel that we've got both strategic complements and strategic substitutes going on in this network. And so I'm interested in how the system is maintained, and I have a feeling that the traditional ecological knowledge is related to this. So moving on to traditional ecological knowledge, Ray Hames' review of the ecological noble-savage debate in Annual Reviews of Anthropology discusses traditional ecological knowledge in terms of a broader humanistic agenda, but is definitely questioning the role of tech in maintaining the sustainability of a system, and following the group selection fallacy. It's understandable. So also I wanted to bring in a point about the revival of animism studies in anthropology that's sort of a recent interest, and this book by Brightman et al. Discusses animism in South America and in Siberia. It takes a philosophical turn, developing a new concept called perspectivism, which I'm not going to go into, but there is a general interest in an increasing interest in animism in anthropology right now. So just re-examining tech something handed down, something having to do with relationships, which makes it particularly interesting for network analysis, and then knowledge, and that is implying some kind of deference to someone owning something or having a certain position. And so I'd like to investigate an example here, specific example of what I would conceive of as traditional ecological knowledge relating to food sharing in Ustavam. Sergei said, if I get a caribou, I'm obliged to give it away, or give away some of the meat. I mean, if I did not give it away, the next hunt would not happen. It's that kind of nature. We share if we catch game. So reformulating this as a social exchange rule, the law of the tundra, if animals are treated properly, including sharing within the community, then the tundra will continue to provide animals. So the law of the tundra includes sharing, but also a number of other things such as proper butchery and just a general care of the animal after it's been killed. So from that social exchange rule, people make observations about whether animals returned or not, and then make an inference about whether they were treated properly. So if the animals returned, therefore they're treated properly, they were shared. Or if the animals didn't return, they were not treated properly. This is a logical form called an abduction, and this has the tenor of a prediction. It's different than deduction and induction, and it really requires a leap of faith or an acceptance that indicates deference to the communicator. So this is really, the knowledge part of it, but also traditional, because a lot of these things are communicated by elders representing ancestors, and that includes the spirit of the tundra, sort of the ancestor of everybody. So here I have a kind of a conceptual model about how this would work in terms of network building and relationship monitoring. We've got elders communicating tech. We've got people listening to this and either communicating their agreement back to the elders or to each other, and then we have other people who may not agree so much. And so a particular example of this might be a taboo. There's a particular fish called the burbot that is caught with big hooks, and when removing the hook, it's convenient to hit the head of the burbot with some kind of steel rod so that it opens its mouth and you can get your pliers in there and pull the hook out, or get your hand down there and pull the hook out. But if for some families, there's a taboo against doing that, especially when you catch burbot on a lake. But so some people agree with that taboo and some people disagree with that taboo. So in theory, this study adds to a series of empirical studies on hunter-gatherer food sharing, illustrating a multiplicity of models of circumstance. In particular, we've got kinship, reciprocity, and their interaction. We've got unreciprocated food transfers, indicating some kind of generosity signaling or attitudinal reciprocity. And then we've got the problem of widespread sharing of food amongst hunter-gatherers, even after they've become integrated into mixed economies. And in order to look at what's behind the maintenance of that kind of system, I think it's important to look beyond one particular environment and to do some comparative research. So if anybody's interested, please get a hold of me, drop me an email. And what I'm interested in doing here is looking at traditional knowledge communication, particularly as it relates to food sharing and how it creates social networks and social norms that support collective action. The next step is to develop an approach to operationalize traditional knowledge communication, along with additional data on food sharing and other relevant variables such as hunter skill and age and cost of hunt, etc. So a few acknowledgments. Really like to thank Dave Nolan for his work on this project, as well as a graduate student, Joelle Rasmussen, and these funding sources, the people in Ustavam. Thank you.